Thanks, Scott.
Copies of today's.
They're printing some.
They're printing. We're printing, bringing them in.
So we have a few copies that are being printed for folks who are on Zoom and didn't hear, but I think that's just copies of the agenda and the packet for people who are in the room. Denise, if you're online, would you go ahead and call roll?
Certainly. I have, and if I miss anybody, please shout out. But in the room, I have Mayor McCardle.
Yes.
Mayor Dalton.
Here.
Mayor Bennett.
Here.
Scott Dadson and Renata Wakely from the Council of Governments.
Here.
On Zoom, I have you, Chair Peralta, Mayor Rogers, Mayor Clark, Councilor Belts, Commissioner Kula, Commissioner Gordon, Ian Davidson,
We're gonna try to help you.
Mayor Watkins, Maria, please tell me if I say this wrong, Hinojos Pressy.
You did great.
Thank you. I try. Mike Jaffe and Amber Mathieson from the Council of Governments, and Ryan Pascarella from Grove, Mueller and Swank, our auditors.
Great.
Did I
Thank
miss
you.
anybody?
I think not. That sounds like no. Thank you so much, Denise, for that. And I'd like to welcome everybody here. We've got a pretty tight agenda. I'm going to try and be respectful of everybody's time today and try and move through the main orders of business. The first order of business that we have beyond calling to order and introductions is public comment. Denise, do we have anybody online or in person who would like to make public comment?
We do not.
Great. Okay, with that, I think we'll just go ahead and move straight into the audit report with Grove, Mueller and Swank. I will go ahead and pass this to Scott Dodson to introduce our guest, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you. We have with us today from Grove, Mueller and Swank, Ryan Pascarella. Did I say your name right, Ryan? I hope I got it right. Who has been our auditor for a good number of years. I met him a year ago when I came on board, and glad to have him here today. This audit, as I have informed the board prior, just so you folks know, we let you know we asked for an extension, and then we asked for a second extension for two sides, both and Ryan will talk about it, Ryan's firm and our firm, just making sure we had able bodies to get information passed back and forth and get work done. And we were not the only ones in the middle of these crazy times to have to do that. But I'm really glad to say that working together, we got all the information together for Ryan to be able to review our financials, look at our books, and for us to allow management time to respond and to keep moving forward. As you folks know, last year in the middle of COVID, we also were with the management team and the board at the end of the fiscal year last year allowed us to move forward with new financial software, which we have gone ahead and purchased, processed, and are in the middle of still transitioning over. This audit is on the old system, so it was a matter of working in two different financial worlds, financial software worlds, as we prepared last year's budget and last year's audited materials, and then transition those materials into this year. So I appreciate Ryan's and his staff's patience on this. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan for his brief audit.
All right. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. Is it possible that I can have the ability to share my screen, please? It looks like it's disabled at the moment. That way I can just kind of walk through the documents.
Sure. Okay. And I have the documents as well, Ryan, in case you need them. But Denise, can he share? I think we have to do that from here.
Well, I can start
We're
talking.
working on it.
Okay, I got it. I think I got it. Ryan, you should have the ability now, sir.
That I do, it looks like. There we
Very
go.
good. Thank you.
All right, so you should be seeing the governance letter that is part of this audit. So
Right now, Ryan, all I can see is that you've started screen sharing, but I don't see anything on the screen.
can other people see that?
No,
I see
we-
the,
Now we do.
oh, I see the document now.
Yes, now, thank you.
Yeah. Boy, talk about a slow process getting into there. Anyhow, okay, so I am here to talk briefly about the June 30, 21 audit and present the financial statements for the year. As multiple people have said already, my name is Ryan Pascarella. I work for Grove, Mueller and Swank. We're a CPA firm here in Salem. We have about 35 people in total in our firm. So this year's audit is going to look a little different, the financial statements, for a couple of reasons. One is in prior years, we have combined the federal compliance audit in with the audited financial statements. If you are looking at your audited financial statements this year, that is not the case. It is a completely separate document now. The real reason is if there's ever any changes that need to be made to the federal compliance report, and usually that means that who's ever providing funding to the organization changes their mind on what's federal and what's not federal money. It allows us to just reissue the federal compliance report versus the entire financial statement. So more and more our firm is going to splitting the two reports apart. So I've really got three documents here that we're going to talk about today. First is the governance letter here. And it is pretty similar to what we've seen in prior years. If you do not have a copy of this, this should have been provided to all of the board because this is our communication to you. Nothing that's really going through management. So I did not see it attached to the packet here, but just make sure, Denise, that everybody does get a copy of the governance letter as well. So this is a very boilerplate letter. There's only one thing that I really want to point out in here. It talks about all kinds of different things. I really just wanted to point out that as part of this process, and Scott already alluded to it, you're transitioning accounting softwares. I would be hard pressed to call your old accounting software really accounting software. It was really a project tracking tool that had a financial module related to it. It's a very unique system, to say the least. So there have been some difficulties working through the audit, getting the year-end numbers correct. Primarily because, well, the old finance director, he knew the ins and outs of the system, and I think he's one of the only ones that does. It's just such an older system. So in this letter, it talks about uncorrected and corrected misstatements. It says in here that we've attached a listing of material changes that we've proposed to the organization so that your financial statements do follow generally accepted accounting principles. So once you get past my letter here, you're going to have a little over 2 pages worth of adjustments. Basically, we start the audit. Here's all the numbers that we're told, are the ending numbers for the year. These are all the adjustments we recommended that the organization did record in the accounting software so that it would meet, like I said, generally accepted accounting principles. This is different than you've seen in previous years with the audit. Normally we don't have any adjusting entries that we propose. So there was quite a few this year, and some of them were pretty good sized numbers.
You replace this software. Yeah.
And then after you get past the journal entries, there's a copy of the representation letter that Scott and Amber signed, basically saying that they've provided all the information to us that we needed in order to perform our audit and that needed to be disclosed in the financial statements. I will keep this brief for you. I saw your agenda. It's a long agenda today, so feel free to interrupt me if you do have any questions about what I'm talking about here, or just other things that you want, some input on. Next document is the annual financial report. And like I said, the federal compliance report is going to be completely separate now. So it is not a component of this that you would have seen in the past. So this, we gave a clean opinion on these financial statements. We feel that, we are providing reasonable assurance that they are free from material misstatement. So once you get down past kind of some of the intro, you're going to see our audit report in here. So this is a little over 2-page report that's in here. And basically what it says is management's responsibility to create these financial statements. We audit the financial statements based on generally accepted auditing standards. And it says that we give reasonable assurance they're free from material misstatement. We do not give absolute assurance that there are no errors in the financial statements. That's not what an audit asks us to do. You don't want us to do that because we would have to look at every transaction during the year, probably look at every email during the year. That's not what an audit is intended to do. Basically just that there are no material misstatements within it. So that's what's kind of laid out here under the auditor's responsibilities. But like I said, it's a clean opinion. You can't get any better than that. We didn't add any modifications or anything to our opinion. Once you get past our letter, you're going to get to the management discussion and analysis. And I just want to point out a couple of things in here that really are changed from the prior year. So management discussion analysis, it's a narrative. It tells you what happened during the year and really what changed, from the prior year. So if I go down to, here's your balance sheet, basically for the year under audit and then the year prior to that. So current assets are about 2.8 million. The bulk of that is cash that's sitting there as of June 30. And then there's also the 2.4 million in notes receivable that are sitting there outstanding. And liability is pretty close to kind of what they were last year. So basically your assets exceeded your liabilities by about 3.7 million at the end of the year, which is up some from the prior year. A lot of that is sitting here in your loan program. So it's considered restricted because it can be used specifically for the loan programs that you operate. The next page is your revenues and expenses. And this is basically, if I was going to describe how the June 30, 21 audits went, it is basically we audited the coronavirus relief funds. It's amazing how much money ended up in the community related to this. So I am showing you your revenues and expenses for the last 2 years. Your revenues, well, they more than doubled. And your expenses, based more than doubled in there as well. A good portion of that was the COVID-19 money that was passed through to Willamette Workforce Partnership as part of the COVID relief plan. So this was a one-time funding in there. So I would not expect to see that high of numbers in the next year. But as you go through it, that is really the change that's happened in here year over year. Once you get past that, it's just, you're going to get the basic balance sheet of the organization for the year. And it's just in more detail than what I just showed you, but pretty straightforward. All right, are there questions about this document, or should I move on to the federal compliance one?
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ryan on this portion of the document? I can't see hands right now, so if anybody does, just please go ahead and speak up. Okay, I don't see or hear anybody, Ryan, so why don't you go ahead and go forward?
Okay. Interrupt me, please. I don't mind. That's what I'm for. All right. So the other portion of the audit that we do is the federal compliance audit. And so since the organization expends more than $750,000 of federal money, you get an annual federal compliance audit, basically where we look at the federal money that was received, how it was spent, and what other requirements are related to it that we need to be looking at. So this year, shockingly, we looked at the coronavirus relief funding that came in. I'll get down past our letters. So out of all the federal money that the organization spent, and this probably is a little small for quite a few people, especially if you're sitting in that conference room there. Overall, look, about 5.9 million was spent in federal money during the year. 2.7 of that is coronavirus relief. Shockingly, we looked at the coronavirus relief program as part of our procedures this year, and really just to see, with this one, you pass the money through to Willamette Workforce Partnership. And so it's really, okay, you know, how did you monitor how they spent the money? Did they follow the plan that they had related to it? Was the reporting that needed to be done being done correctly? And so we did not have any findings related to how that $2.7 million was spent. So we gave a clean opinion on the compliance side of the audit. The one finding that we really do have, well, one or two, they're kind of all related. I'm going to scroll down. The end of this report is the schedule of findings and questioned costs. So it's a summary of the federal compliance audit and issues that we had. So in here, there are going to be two findings, both related to really the financial reporting side. So I showed you briefly all the journal entries that were recorded as part of this audit. Those numbers were pretty large. And so we ended up writing a finding that says that if those items weren't identified by the auditors and that the organization recorded them, your financial statements would have been materially incorrect. And so since there were material changes that need to be made, we ended up writing a material weakness over the numbers that were in there prior to the audit beginning. We've given a little summary here of kind of where we started and where we ended, just so you can kind of see what happened briefly. And then it gets down into why and everything. But really all I want to point out in here is there is a section in here for the views of the responsible officials, and basically what the organization is going to do so that this type of thing doesn't happen again. And a whole lot of it really is related to the accounting software and making sure that there's an accounting software in place that the organization understands and can use correctly, so that we don't have any material changes need to be made going forward. So feel free to read down through that. The other one is related to the expenditure schedule that I showed you just a few minutes ago. They had that 2.6 million. Basically, when we got creation of this schedule is management's responsibility. My job is to audit it. And so we had a somewhat similar finding to what we did on the financial records, but this is specific to this schedule that the organization needs to prepare. The first time we got it, none of the coronavirus relief money was on there. And so it ended up needing to be added to it in order to know what programs we need to audit. If we were to audit the wrong program, the federal government really doesn't like that, and you would be required to probably be re-audited. And that would be additional money, obviously, at that point, which nobody wants to spend additional money. So the views of the responsible officials, pretty similar to what you saw on the other one, as far as really, I mean, trying to develop the software in order to do it, but really also just double checking numbers prior to the auditors getting that. Definitely is helpful.
Is the remediation changing?
Are there questions related to this document?
It's a policy decision.
Any
There's a
questions?
question here. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Ryan, there was a question in the audience about, is the remediation only in the software? Ryan, since that's management's response, may I respond to that, sir?
You can respond to that, sure.
So yes, it's partially the software and how those things are accounted, and certainly we're in process of that. Remember, we're auditing the old one, but it's also some policies following today's audit and your consent agenda. We've recommended some policies, including one about flow through dollars and making sure that when the dollars flow through, there's an accounting about how they come back through if they're returned or if there's any other conditional issues on that. As Ryan said, nothing went missing. The money's in the right places but making sure that the report are going through one way. And if they were to go back, making sure they come back through. We've recommended a policy that we then can adopt as a board and as a staff and make sure we pick up on this.
Will the feds be back then to take a look at this, or is, I wasn't sure.
Ryan would have to answer that. I think that will help correct it. You've corrected it within it, but we would, with this policy and making sure in our system, we would catch that the next time. Is that right, sir?
Yeah, I mean, that's the intent of your policy, so that, I guess I'm thinking specifically of that $211,000.
Yeah.
That kind of, it got refunded back to Business Oregon. And I don't think anybody really knew that from the financial side. So that's what the policy would do, fix it going forward. The numbers in the schedule that are in that federal compliance report are accurate because that 211,000 was correctly taken care of in that report.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And just to clarify for people on the call who don't have the context, essentially in this case, what happened is we were a pass-through entity for a subsequent grantee. We awarded the grant to the grantee. They spent down some, but not all of the money. And then they refunded the 211,000 directly back to Business Oregon instead of coming through us. And so we've adopted a policy that would require them to come back through us and then go back to Business Oregon. That was really the mistake that was made, as I understand it. Is that an accurate characterization of that?
Ryan, that's for you.
I would believe so, yes. That's exactly the way that it was interpreted. The auditors discovered that 211,000, I think, looking at the reports that were being submitted to the funding agency. And there was a difference between what we were seeing for the revenue in your general ledger versus what the reports were showing, because the reports were being created by, Willamette Workforce Partnership. So that's that's all.
And I just want to acknowledge as well the appreciation that I have for our staff, because this past year, as was mentioned earlier, they continued to work on this antiquated project management software with an accounting component to it, while at the same time transitioning to our next more standard software for accounting. So the fact that we went from, I can't remember how many findings we had the previous year, but to drop that down to one this year while making that transition was really appreciated by me as the chair. So Scott, thank you. And Ryan, thank you for elaborating on this part of the report. And I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
And Scott did mention it. There was a few extensions that were asked for related to this. One of them, basically, it was a struggle getting through all of the information we needed to, just lots of back and forth with the organization. But then it got to a point where I was so busy, I couldn't get to it. And so the second extension really was me asking the Secretary of State's office, could I have more time? Because I needed more time to do it. So that was really my extension. Everything did get filed timely. That federal compliance report is required to be submitted by March 31st, and it's already in and accepted by the federal government. So we're officially done with the audit for the year at this point. So that's my presentation. I know there's a lot on your agenda, so I will keep it short, but any other questions before I get out of here?
Guys, any questions from around the room? Just go ahead and shout them out if you have a question.
No, I was just, this is Casey Kula. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, staff, and thanks, Chair. Realize this is a big deal and lots of work, and I really appreciate seeing both here's the correction actions that we're already working on, here's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Casey. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. Ryan, thank you so much for your help with us on this report and for giving us such a good rundown on it. We really appreciate your work, and I guess we'll probably be working with you again next year. So thanks again.
All right, thank you. Have a good meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. There's one change I'd like to make. I'll entertain a motion to this effect, but we have the department activity reports in the consent calendar, and staff has requested that we move those out of the consent calendar and into the general order of the meeting. So I would take a motion to move the department activity reports out of the consent calendar and into the regular meeting.
I move to pull the department activity reports from the consent calendar and move it to the main agenda.
Thank you. Ian, is there a second?
Casey seconds.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to move the department activity reports out of the consent calendar. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. Returning to the consent calendar, are there any other items that anyone would like to remove from the consent calendar at this time?
Move approval.
It's been moved by Mayor McCardle. Is there a second to move approval for the consent calendar?
Second.
It's been seconded by Roxanne Belts, I heard. And all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Okay, thank you very much. With that, we will move to staff reports. Scott, I will hand the mic back over to you.
Thank you. My report in general administrative services is that we continue to do chief executive recruitments around the region. We did 4 in 2021, and we're already off to 2 in this fiscal year. In this calendar year. So we continue to move forward with those administrative matters. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of movement in management right now around the region. So it's just one of those things. But we continue to do that, as well as city manager and other evaluations for executive officers around the region. And we have completed several of those as well. Into business lending, I'm just going to jump to that because as many of you folks know, we are without our business lending program manager right now. We are in the search process for that and actually have hired a recruiter. So interestingly enough, we had to hire a banking recruiter to help us with that. And Renata and I are co-working with that because the business lending program actually sits in the Community and Economic Development Division with Renata's group. So we are moving forward with that. As a report out to you folks, wanted you folks to know that we do have money on hand to be lent. However, we are going to, by the end of this month into April, be ending the EDA CARES money. We lent out around $1 million. And we're only able to get that much out into the system. And that was a flurry of activity at the first part of the 2021 calendar year. One thing that I will note in talking to our bankers on our loan committees is there is a lot of cash in the marketplace right now, both on the private side and the public side. So we got out quite a bit. We were able to affect positively about 4 loans in a positive manner, but eventually that money will go away. We still, however, have our defederalized RLF funds and our defederalized SBA funds, as well as access to 7A and SBA 504s. We're closing in on getting hopefully a program manager for that. We've had the assistance of a former employee, Allison Boswell, who actually retired several years ago, who has just been a real sport, and she's helped out a ton trying to keep the phone lines answered and returning calls. I put several pieces of information into your packet. One thing I would note, I made one mistake in what I gave you. The loans in the pipeline thing is really not supposed to go out. I'm supposed to tell you how many and not who they are, because those loans may or may not happen. But so I would ask that you kindly maybe remove those from your packet and put them in your shredder, only because they are private and confidential information. But so you know, one of the things that made Allison and I and Renata feel good about that portion was that there are at least 9 different interested parties in loan applications, either with banks, bank-driven or client-driven directly to us, which means that the activity is starting to build back up. And so having this position filled is important. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Renata.
Okay, thank you, Scott, members of the board. I just wanted to highlight 2 things from my report. For those that have the packet, it's starting on page 15 of your packet, and specifically on page 18, there's a flyer that I've included. We serve as the economic development district for our region, and we meet monthly now. We used to meet quarterly with the other Oregon economic development districts. We have an association. It really is about a partnership and leveraging projects and opportunities together. As we've been tracking broadband needs and opportunities in the region, we invite foundations and our state partners to those meetings. We know that Business Oregon's broadband office is finally being stood up. They should have some funding in this fall. So there will be funding opportunities through Business Oregon and directly through federal agencies for expansion of broadband in our region. Because of our relationship with foundations, Ford Family Foundation basically said, how can we help prepare the region and the state for accessing these dollars? If you look at FCC's current mapping of distribution of broadband, for those that have looked at that, you will see that it's not as transparent as really those that wish to show whether they have access to broadband or not. So Ford Family Foundation partnered with Link Oregon, which is a nonprofit through the universities. I am no expert on broadband, but I'm trying to learn as this opportunity arose. And Ford Family needed someone to pass through dollars to Link Oregon to expand or do mapping and surveying of broadband in our region. So we are purely, as an economic development district and an association, serving as a pass-through of Ford Family Foundation or dollars to Link Oregon. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention at this point is that we believe in the next month, in preparation for dollars that will be available in the fall, Link Oregon is preparing and will be conducting surveys in our region. And our job as the COG and Economic Development District will also be to get that word out. So I'm just wanting to put that on your radars. I'm reaching out to the counties and various broadband staff who serve in the counties and other partners to help get the word out. The survey is not live yet, but I will bring this to all of you as soon as it is live. It will be speed test data, and the intent of this program, according to those that are much more familiar, is that if we can collect good speed test data and show or counter the FCC maps, we're going to be able to bring more dollars into the region and show that we're more competitive. We need the dollars. And so that's the interest. We don't want to just rely on the FCC saying you guys are fine in your area, so you don't need our dollars. We have also had Business Oregon's broadband office at the table and part of these discussions the entire time. Because they were standing up their office, they could not serve as a pass-through because they didn't have the opportunity to enter into contracts because they're still working to stand up their office. So that was one item I wanted to highlight from my report. And being that he's in office today and some of our board members are in office, I also wanted to introduce our newest staffer who's sitting to my right, Kyle Jenkins. Kyle joined us in November 2020. He serves, I'm going to list off the cities. Wanted to give him an opportunity to kind of see the board members and for you to put a face to the name. He is currently providing services to Almsville, Carlton, Dayton, Jefferson, Falls City, Scotts Mills, and Mount Angel. So that's an as needed So, he's providing office hours to Jefferson. They've asked of that, but other communities are kind of on call and as needed, but that's a lot for one planner to kind of be under contract. He previously was with the Department of Land Conservation Development, our regional representative. We had an opportunity to hire Kyle, and he's been doing a fantastic job. And really jumped in, as many of you know, during COVID. It's a more difficult onboarding because he was slow to meet our other staff and all of that. In our annual report, I highlighted a project, the Dayton UGB land swap. That's also something that Kyle's doing, and that's a pilot and the first one in our region. So extremely proud of the hard work that he's doing.
Thank you, Renata. Thank you, Kyle, for your service to us, and especially thanks for help with the creativity on that Dayton land swap. That's a huge deal for that community, so we really appreciate that. Did you want to say any words to the board while you're here, or am I putting you on the spot?
Not particularly. That's nice to meet everybody. I've been here for a year and a half, and I feel like I'm still meeting people every day. So it's good to meet you all, and yeah, happy to be here.
COVID's made that kind of weird, but yeah, we're glad you're here and with us, and definitely glad to have your expertise. Thank you so much. Okay, is that it with the staff report, Scott?
I'm going to just call on Mike and then Amber to see if they have any other reports that they need to do out from staff. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I will also try to be brief. So in your packet is a summary of the kind of activities happening at MWACT. I gave you a summary for the January and February meetings, including status updates of the Aurora Donald interchange and the Newburgh Dundee project. And then a lot of the focus this quarter has been on the Oregon Transportation Commission and their deliberations on how to use $412 million of flexible funds. I know a lot of the board members are aware of this as part of the legislative subcommittee. So I've been personally very involved in following how they're using those funds and helping the COG board and the SCATS board as well write letters to the OTC to share our views on those funds. Beyond that, the SCATS area keeps working on its projects. We're updating our long-range plan. We're updating our short-term transportation improvement program, where we have about $20 million to allocate over the next 6 years. And we're actively reviewing applications from the local jurisdictions in Salem-Kaiser. Our Safe Route to School program is going on. We're actually doing some in-class instruction. McCrae Carmichael is doing her second school this week. She just texted me how excited the K through 4th graders have been doing these events. And we have a number of things planned for the rest of the year. In GIS, Leslie and her group have been very busy finishing up the redistricting for a number of organizations. We did finish up City of Newburgh, just about to finish up the Salem area mass transit districts, and working with Silver Falls School District on their redistricting. Also helping the city of Sheraton with their Census Bureau boundary annexation survey, and working with one of our newer members, Marion Soil and Water Conservation District, with some field collection tools that link up to a GIS. Not in the report is something that's just about to start for Yamhill County. We've been working on a contract with them for a number of months. The contract is signed, I believe, as of yesterday, and they have their kickoff meeting tomorrow. This is to do a large overhaul of their GIS systems. It's a GIS enterprise system that will cover both the assessors and the public works and the planning office. It's a rather large contract for us, but we are providing these services at a great discount to the private sector for the county. So I think it's a win-win for both sides, and hope to tell you more about it after that gets completed. So those are some of the highlights, and happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Mike? I see Mayor Rogers has his hand up. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to thank you and your team for the help with the redistricting. And I also wanted to tell you that immediately after, we had to appoint a new city councilor for one of those reassigned districts because we had a resignation. So it was timely and we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rogers. Anybody else for Mike? Hearing none. Thanks, Mike, for your report.
Sure.
All right, last one is Amber for financials.
Yeah, so as was mentioned in the audit presentation, we have been transitioning from our old GMS project management software to QuickBooks. We're still in that transition, but we're narrowing in on the last of the major components, which is moving our payroll from GMS and an outside timekeeping software into QuickBooks. We've made updates to our employee files and the accounts for year-end adjustments and benefit elections, all those sorts of things that come with payroll. And so we're getting ready to make that transition in April. Otherwise, COG's financial activities currently, we're at 67% of the fiscal year at the end of February. We've spent about 70% of the expenditure budget, and that's not uncommon. Many of our expenses are front loaded to the front half of the year and the very beginning of the calendar year, as you can imagine, with renewals of subscriptions and dues and memberships and those sorts of things. The really positive note, though, is the revenue stream is at 77% as compared to 67% of the year. So earnings-wise, we're ahead of schedule. We've already done one supplemental budget, and we'll likely bring one more back to the board in June. And the reason for that is we're still entering into new contracts, and some of those will require some expenditures before the end of the fiscal year. So in order to make those expenditures, we need to recognize the incoming revenue stream. I won't belabor any further on the audit report. I think Ryan did a great job of his presentation, and we'll talk more with some other things on the agenda as we go.
Thank you, Amber. Any questions for Amber? Okay, hearing none and seeing none. I did just want to comment with appreciation for our management staff. We're able as a COG to perform very high level of services because of the team that we have in place. And in the last year, and particularly in the last few months, I've been very appreciative of Mike Jaffe for helping to turn out public officials to advocate for transportation dollars from OTC. I've been very appreciative of Amber for working with less staff than she probably needs to go through this audit report and doing the hard work of transitioning the software. And I've always been grateful for Renata and the expertise that she's brought into business development for our region. So thank you to all of our staff managers. I hope you take that back to your individual members and individual team members that were so appreciative of your work. With that, we are going to go into our actions for this meeting. And right as we were preparing to do that, my screen crashed with the next agenda item. Scott, could you read the next agenda item for me while I pull up the agenda?
Yes, sir. The action items for the board's consideration are two. The first one being resolution 2022-05, which are the rates for services found on page 58 to 64 of your packet. The issue in front of the board at this time, Mr. Chairman, is setting the hourly rates for various services provided by the COG on the contract basis.
Got it. Okay, I appreciate that lead in. I've got the page and my agenda back up. Scott, why don't you go ahead and lead us in a conversation about the rate review? I understand that our rates are tied to the Seattle CPI historically, but we're doing something a little bit different this year on the recommendation of the executive board and staff. So would you like to share that out with the committee?
Yes, sir, I will. One of the recommendations that you're going to get in the budget process will be that I'll be recommending we have a system, and when we set the membership rates for the members, we do that based upon the June 30th CPIW Seattle. When we set the rates for both COLA and the rates for services, we concentrate on the December report out of CPI Seattle in December. So this year, as you folks know, that is 5.3%. My recommendation on the cost side of the balance sheet in the budget when we get to that point is going to be for that kind of 5.3 to be reflected in cost of living staff. However, in the cost of service delivery, after we reviewed our rates, we are recommending a 4% increase only. So our margins will tighten a bit between our hourly rates and overhead costs that we charge and what our costs will be passed on to the membership. As the board remembers, in December, we elected to start adding capacity in our area. So we want to make sure that we're serving our membership, but we're going to do it. These membership rates are only going up 4%. So we're going to keep the rates at 4%. Our cost will go up a little bit above that when the budget is presented later this year. But we feel that we have room to run in those margins and that the business right now from the membership is both causing us to add some capacity and also have to play in a market where it's very tough to recruit good staff. I think every one of you can appreciate that right now in your own organizations. So we want to pass that savings on in our rate increases of only and holding that at 4%. So that's less than what we would by normal road do. And we feel that's only fair to the membership. There's a lot to be done. As you can see in our audit, we had double the amount of flow through money coming through. With ARPA, with ILJA, there is more work and more opportunities for our membership moving forward. So we want to make sure we have both capacity and we can compete and at rates that are sufficient and fair to our membership in order to get things done. So that's our recommendation out of these rates.
So I just want to clarify, essentially the CPI suggests that we should raise rates 5.3%, which is what we've historically done. The staff recommendation, the executive board recommendation is instead to raise them 4%, and with the intent of passing some of that cost savings on to our membership. And we will offset that internal cost just through increased revenues this year. So we'll run a little tighter, but we'll run a little bigger. Does anybody have any questions or is there any discussion on the resolution that's in front of us?
Sure.
Ian Davidson.
Thank you. I just also want to note that this doesn't preclude us from raising rates if inflation is not transitory or if inflation gets drastically worse in the coming months or years. We're not locking ourselves in for a full year or anything like that.
Thank you, Ian. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Rogers. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Ian Davidson. All those, is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. We'll do it aye, nay. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion 2202-5 passes unanimously. On to the next item. Scott, would you like to introduce the topic?
Yes, sir. I'm going to have Amber assist me with this part, and this is resolution 2022-06. And these are adoption of the comprehensive financial management policies. There are two reasons to do this, and I'm going to turn it over to Amber to talk about some of the specifics. But those two reasons are, number one, best practices to make sure that our policies meet our new software and our new intent for management on how we intend to manage our finances. And I think that is not only in response to several audits, but it's also best practices and something management feels very strongly about. we want to make sure that we're representing to our membership the best we can in our financials. So these policies are a reflection of that. These are something that we have actually held in the background. We've tried to follow them anyways, but this gave us an opportunity to clean those up, bring them up to date and up to speed. Hopefully this will be the kind of thing we do every year for you folks, is give you the best and brightest that we can in practices. One, and then the second is specifically with pass-through dollars. I do not think we're entering an era of more pass-through dollars. Because of that, we want to make sure we have a good tracking system for how money flows through, and if how money is spent and reported back through. The disconnect was simply that management knew, we did find out that those monies were being returned. We were informed by the grantee. That was a good thing. There was nothing nefarious there, thankfully, but we didn't tie them back to the financials. So that's an important step. That's part of transparency. So we've included a policy about how that money would then track back through, attached to our financials, be recognized by the fiduciary role of the board, and then be on our books properly. So that was one that, quite frankly, it's nice to put that in there, but I will tell you, we had to really search for that kind of a policy as a best practice. So I feel like what we've given you folks is a really up-to-date policy, and one that we will follow, and certainly hopefully brings it up to speed. Amber, what am I missing here on our policies?
I don't know that you've missed anything, but I would add, not only are these best practice policies, they're also the kind of policies that help us move our financial system forward in the direction of seeking acknowledgement from outside agencies, which, as you may be aware, like the Government Finance Officers Association has an awards program that is specifically geared towards clarity in accounting. And part of that is their budget award program, and then they have a financial reporting award program. And having these policies in place are a requirement of either of those programs. And so as we're creating clarity, not only in our internal functionality, we're also creating some transparency for the membership. And as we move forward towards seeking some of those awards, it's going to, I think, offer some confidence to the members and the public that we are advancing our financial systems, our reporting, and making all of that reporting more standardized and transparent for everyone who's reading them.
Thank you, Amber. That's our report, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Scott and Amber. I appreciate that and appreciate the rapid action in response to the audits on that one point with regard to pass-through dollars. Is there any further discussion on Resolution 2022-6? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve 2022-6.
I move to approve Resolution 2022-6.
Thank you, Maria. Is there a second?
Second.
Dalton.
Dalton, because he said his name, you got in first.
Oh, is that how it works now?
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Okay, thank you. The ayes have it unanimously. I would like to go back to the item E, the consent calendar. Mike Jaffe raised the question, did we actually vote to approve the consent calendar? I think we did, but can I get a confirmation on that from?
Yes, we did. I moved it.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. Thanks, Mike, for the question. I appreciate it. Okay, we are at the annual meeting review and the executive director's report. I'll hand it back to Scott.
Thank you. Of course, our annual report this year, folks, was online. It was all online. We tried to follow the same format as the year before, so there really weren't any additional expenses that were related to that this year, so we don't have anything to report out. But I will say that the planning committee would like to do a summer gathering. And that's an opportunity to get together back as a group in the same room. And so we will begin that process. We'll keep that committee together to plan that little soiree. What we do, we call it Chuck Bennett's long farewell. So we're going to do it, start at City Hall, maybe dance around the city.
I think we're planning to do that one at the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. So that
Yes,
may be
we
quite
are.
a,
Yes.
might be quite a hump for the mayor to
Yeah.
make it down there.
But you know, it'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, we can go from here to there. So
It's going to be a
but
lot of fun.
It will. So we're going to plan to do that. It'll be nice to see everyone back in. As far as the executive directors, let me report out that a couple of things. The office is open for business. It has actually technically been open to the public since about August or September of last year. But now what we have in front of us is our first real trial run at a hybrid meeting. So this gives folks an opportunity to participate both online, be part of the meeting, and be in the room if they need to be in. So I'm glad to see folks in the room. This actually came from a grant, some of that EDA CARES money that came from EDA prior year. Yep, last fiscal year. And so Renata was good enough to write that grant. We received that grant, and so we've improved our setup in here with 3 new TVs and cameras and some things like that we are still learning how to use. So we'll figure this whole thing out here eventually. But this is our first hybrid meeting, and so we are open back up. One of the things that we do is we have an all-staff meeting. We made this point clear back to staff that if you folk are in that hybrid mode, and that's the way we can interact and do business with you, that's fine. But if you need them on site, me on site, any of our management staff on site, we're happy to be on site with you folks as well in the region. So I want to make that clear to everyone. And finally, after a year, I think I get to start visiting everyone in good stead. I've actually been to quite a few. This really gives me an opportunity to get out. So that's all I have to report at this time.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. I guess I'll just say from my perspective, chairing the meeting remotely, I was a little worried about how this would work in the mixed format, but I think it's great. I'm very happy with it. I like the fact that Zoom gives us the ability to meet without, I mean, for me, it would be an hour drive each way. So I hope that people will continue to take advantage of the Zoom and they find that a useful format as well as going in. Well, that's pretty much it. We've got an opportunity now. We usually give time for board members to make some comments for the good of the order, either things related to their communities that they'd like to mention to other folks on the board, or concerns or questions, comments, anything for the good of the order. Now would be the time. So does anybody have any comments they'd like to make?
Sal?
McCardle, Mayor McCardle.
McCardle here. Would you like to take a moment and talk about the legislative committee's efforts and what got done, so that everybody knows what got done and where it's going?
Yeah, well, the legislative committee has been meeting every week during the legislative session and has tried to meet every other week prior to that. In the short session, we did not have a hugely ambitious agenda. The one priority that we had was to get grant funding to basically have grant administrator hired through the COG that could provide services to the different local cities and regional cities. And that got cut in the budget process. We'd actually gone to bat for all 6 economic development entities. So each one would get $250,000 to fund 6 positions to do that around the state. The legislature cut that money, and I was pretty angry about it, as our lobbyist and executive director will attest. And so we're meeting with Speaker Rayfield in early April to discuss an emergency board allocation for those funds. Additionally, the other focus really for the legislative committee, really thanks to the work of Mike Jaffe, had been to promote different aspects of accessing transportation dollars. Commissioner Mordhorst, I was very appreciative of his work in turning out other local officials, Mayor McCardle, Mayor Clark as well, in terms of just reaching out and contacting other elected officials and getting people to turn out and advocate for the county. John, is there anything legislative that I've missed? We haven't gotten the report back from the lobbyist on the full stuff. That's going to be next week.
Did you want to talk about what we're thinking about going forward, doing some policy considerations and communications and meetings?
Yeah, why don't you hit that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate that. One of the things that the committee talked about is that how important it is with the huge number of new legislators coming in, is that in the coming months, we're going to need to coalesce around our major areas of interest and start talking to legislators, each one of us in our own areas, talking to legislators and then possibly bringing people together so that they start understanding what the regional needs are. And we need to do that probably summertime before September 1, because after September 1, legislative candidates are not allowed to think. They can't hear very well because of they're in campaign mode, but so that we can make sure that our message becomes part of the agenda early on. And because they need to hear from us and they need to hear from a number of us. And I think there is opportunity now. Now, Scott, did you want to add anything to that?
I would say that what we're going to do is take our legislative policy in our areas of housing, transportation, and regional infrastructure needs. And we're going to talk big picture with all of our region and try to find, remember, you can always advocate for your individual jurisdictions and those kinds of things. And we want that to happen. And we want to be an amplifier for that. But we also want to hone in on some things that have a regional impact. So like in transportation, getting some of these big lifts moving forward with the dollars out there is really important. Everything from I-5 Donald Aurora exit to 1822 all the way out in Grand Ronde. So those are just examples of the big push that we want to push at a regional level. We have lots of needs, but we want to have a regional focus, John.
Well said, guys. Yeah, I mean, transportation, housing, homelessness, and then try to make sure that entities like ours have the flexibility that we need to get the loans dispersed out to the and grants and whatnot dispersed out to businesses and local jurisdictions is kind of the order of the day. Anybody who is interested in participating in our legislative committee, we meet Wednesdays at 7 o'clock. We're doing it every other week. I think we are meeting. Are we on for next week, Scott?
No, I'm going to be in back home, but
okay, so we're off.
First week of April.
We're off for that. Yeah, we're off for that for 2 weeks, but we'll be back on. And if you're interested, just let Denise know and she can get you a Zoom link for that. Does anybody have any? I think that's Executive Director. Does anybody else have additional discussion for the good of the order? Nothing happening in your communities? Salem?
There's a lot happening. I don't want to keep you here all evening. So.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you, Mayor. Sorry to put you on the spot.
For a change, there's actually nothing happening in Newburgh, which is good. We like it.
It's quiet in Newburgh. Ian.
Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity to let you all know and publicly thank Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden for their support with a recent congressional win for us. As many of you know, Congress recently adopted a budget, and in that budget, there was funding for Chariots to purchase 5 additional battery electric buses. And so that puts our number up to 15. We will be receiving our first 10 at the end of this year, and then they'll go into service next year. So pretty excited. We're able to, with these buses, provide the reliability our riders expect, but now with no tailpipe emissions.
Congratulations on that, Ian. Good to hear. If there are no other comments for the good of the order, I'd like to thank everybody for taking some time out of your day this afternoon to help us conclude our business, and business is done now for the day. So I appreciate you being here, and we'll gavel out at 4:37. Thanks a bunch, everybody.
You know, are we turned off? No, we're not turned off yet.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Scott. Take care.
Cheers.
No, because I used to have to drive in from Albany to come to this meeting, you know.
Oh, sure.
Yes, and so I